once again to the Finance Forum. I'm Abdu-Raof Hanslo. And this week, once again, is a continuation of the program of last week, and that is a look at the Government Employees Pension Fund, a deeper look into exactly what the runnings of the fund is and exactly what the members should be doing and what they should be looking out for. My guest in studio is Mr. Etienne Wilsnack from Alchemy Financial Services. And as in last week, he's going to give us that pertinent information regarding this specific fund. Good day to you, Etienne. Once again, it's a pleasure having you here in studio with me.
It is a pleasure being back. Thank you.
Now, you know, in last week we chatted in depth about the Government Employees Pension Fund and exactly surrounding what the issues are, specifically from the legislative perspective, where there was this rumor, I think it started in 2015, of the pension fund reform, the retirement reform at least, and the, how can I put it, the panic that set off specifically to the members of the Government Employees Pension Fund. So to wrap that up, basically we spoke about various different things and how people panicked and people with the bad choices they made and the bad advice that they've gone through. What I'd like to specifically look at today, Etienne, is what those bad advices were and how that ultimately has impacted on the members of GEPF.
Okay, so I said that the anxiety and the fear was based off rumors. We've had that conversation. So the impact, however, now can be seen 3 years later. And so when I was approached in 2014, early 2015, there was a lot of guidance given off the back of trust. And people had to trust what I said, although there was all of this, and sadly 80% of them didn't necessarily follow your advice.
Yeah.
They still went along and exited or left and resigned prematurely. The consequence to that is, however, that I'm going to safely say that 70 to 80% of the people that had left prematurely had probably at some point in the last few months would have wanted to come back to work.
Okay.
So the money's run up.
Well, we do understand. I mean, ultimately, if one collects a large sum of money, and specifically you're not used to the quantums of cash that pension funds normally pay out, especially if you've been working for 20, 30 years.
You've nailed it. Absolutely. So you take somebody that's been earning an 11,000 rand a month for the last few years of their life, and there you say you've got access to 800,000 rand. There's more money they've seen in their lifetime. The problem is that often they haven't been trained or educated to manage that large sums of money, and now they have access to it because they've left the fund.
Yeah.
They've taken all their money outside of GPF and it's accessible. An interesting observation is, as management, we need to deal with what we call ombuds complaints, where people across the board come and say, this has happened, we're unhappy with it, and I need to interject before it goes to the ombudsman. Yeah. 80 to 90% of those complaints that cross my desk every week is people wanting to access the last 2/3 of the compulsory pension fund. In other words, they've given the option of accessing the 1/3, like retirement planning works, and the 2/3 supposed to purchase an income. The 1/3 within the first 6 months spent. And as recently as yesterday, I've had to deal with 2 this week. One yesterday afternoon, where the consumer is now saying, I've spent the 1/3. They do not understand that the 2/3 bound by law, that there is the Pension Fund Act saying you can't access that.
Yeah.
They want it. They want that money. The problem is they're in their mid-50s. They have 20 years of life left, and the money is already up, and that's been the biggest consequence.
Now, Etienne, I mean, basically, we've worked in corporate and you've worked for companies, and normally prior retirement, if you resign from your employer, you had the option of taking all your money. I think that's still the case at the moment if you're in a pension fund, or has that changed to somewhat?
Now we've got to be very careful, because there's two ways of retiring or providing for retirement. It's got one's called a provident fund and one's a pension fund, and the Act clearly stipulate that they are different. The method of payment, the taxation. We could have an half an hour session on this. So I'm going to caution that I don't go into too much detail. But the provident fund is the one that actually pays out 100% at retirement. Pension fund, due to its nature and the way it's been taxed, you only access 1/3, and the 2/3 is supposed to buy you the income that's going to replace your salary. You cannot access that.
Now, I mean, if one looks at the whole scenario, and you found the mass exodus of members from this specific fund due to panic from bad advice, was there any communication from the fund itself as far as advice is concerned, or to put to bed ultimately that the rumors were false and that the fund was still going to be standing, there was no bankruptcy in the fund, or that money was not going to be taken and people were going to be running away with it?
I think GPF did. They were running road shows. I know of 2 gentlemen that were flying nationally to go to departments that were very badly affected. I was one of them that got drawn into GPF space and said, please come and talk to our members and give them context around what's really happening. The sad part is that there was an underlying energy that no matter how detailed the advice was, that most of the members wanted to leave for other reasons, and this was just their moment. And in other words, it was actually just an excuse.
And I mean, if one looks at it, I mean, retirement. If we look at private scenarios where one is invested in a retirement annuity, and you elect to retire at the age of 55, you need to save so much money because the cost of living, firstly the lifespan has increased, and second, as you mentioned last week, and then also the cost of living is forever increasing. So by the time you reach the age of 55, the cost of living is going to be higher, and therefore it's just going to take so much more savings. So the dream of retiring early has basically been diminished by the fact that there's something called inflation and the cost of living and the extended lifespan. Now, you know, Etienne, I'm one of those people, if I belong to a fund, the one thing that I specifically want is I want details of exactly what I have, how it's performing, where my money is being invested, and all that. And has GEPF, as a fund manager, done this? Have they been sending out regular statements to members, and have they been communicating to members concerning their portfolio of where their money is being invested currently?
They have been more so. They've made information available on the internet, so you could actually access that. The concern for me was that there are multi-levels of responsibility to distribute this. For example, GPF would send it to my department, and my department has an HR department that should distribute that. So you can't, if the member did not get the fund statement, it's not necessarily because GPF did not send it. The problem could also be locally. Now, if my HR is not functional, if my HR is not on the ball, I'm not going to get the statement anyway. So we can have this debate for days. My advice to your viewer is, do not make anybody else responsible for obtaining your statement. Step up to it and say, I know where I can access it, and at the moment I can offer you that as well. So we have, in conjunction with a GPF, we have a calculator, so I can access a 9-page report for you. The one that you get from GPF is a single pager, and we can actually then provide you with a detailed report that you can then peruse with your partner and start planning. You asked earlier, what's the biggest concern? People aren't planning for retirement. We're living day by day, and we're not really concerned with the fact that one day our employer is going to say, thank you for your service, but you're no longer employed. You have now retired, and we're not applying ourselves to that. So the pension fund statement, you can get that online, or you can just contact me and I'll be able to provide you with a 9-page report.
And those contact details for Alchemy Financial Services, we'll ask our honored guests to list those details at the end of the show. Etienne, the other thing that's also a concern, and you know, with pension funds, we find that members are at risk if something happens to them, that ultimately what happens to the pension fund. So a lot of our community believes that I'm working all my life, I'm contributing to a pension fund, but if something happens to me, money's gone.
Yes.
So I know that by law there's something called beneficiaries of pension funds, and where the actual member basically appoints beneficiaries to the fund in the event that something happens to him or her. In this regard, has GEPF basically updated that type of information and asked for that type of information, or would it be the responsibility of the member of the fund to contact the fund if beneficiaries do change?
Yeah, that's not GPF's responsibility per se. They provide you with the documentation, they've got the systems, they'll implement the changes, but GPF wouldn't know. So for example, I joined government when I was 19 years old, and I'm now 27, and I had gotten married, and it is my responsibility to go to GPF or my HR and say, please provide me with a beneficiary statement. I would now like to leave my proceeds to my wife and no longer my mom.
Yeah.
I had found people that's been in GPF for 28 and 30 years, and their beneficiary statement is still the same person that they initiated when they started working at the age of 18.
Yeah.
That's a problem. The legal implication of that, or that on your family, is far-reaching. So I would urge you members, go and see who your state, go to your HR. You don't need to go to GPF directly. Go to your HR, find out who it is, and if you need to change it, please update that. Okay, it's a big problem for most, because in the black communities there's often a second wife.
Yeah.
And the implication of that then, because you haven't informed GPF that there is another partner or there are other children, there's another family, GPF would not be able to distribute the benefits because there's no clarity. If you have one wife in Transkei and one wife in Cape Town, and they're both claiming to the fund and saying, but I'm the wife, and now GPF sits and says, hang on, we now need to assess this, that investigation could be indefinite.
Yeah.
You have to update it, you have to check it, and if your circumstances change, contact your HR and just implement the changes. It takes 2 minutes.
Yeah, we handled a case not too long ago of specifically a member of a specific pension fund who had his wife on as the beneficiary of the fund.
Yes.
But in the interim, prior to him passing away, his wife had passed away. So when basically he passed away, he had kids. So what he did was, he said that his wife basically, according to his brother, his wife would manage the money on behalf of the kids, and because she's ultimately going to be looking after the kids.
Yes.
Yeah, the wife passes away 2 years prior to him passing away. So yeah, he passes away, beneficiary is not updated, so the money goes to the estate of the wife. So that was a huge problem.
Yes.
It was an absolute nightmare. And I think where you're coming from is scenarios like that as well.
Exactly.
Or in the case of divorce, or in the case of passing of a son, or passing of a parent, where they're listed. It just complicates matters a little bit further, and that was an absolute nightmare of a scenario.
If you haven't updated your beneficiary statement and your circumstances have changed, that's probably what you're going to be facing.
Now, Etienne, you said that people that want to update the details, they can contact you as well.
They're welcome to contact us as well.
And also, you said for further information regarding the specific fund, the Government Employees Pension Fund, and any other advice generally regarding retirement, they can contact you. Your numbers, we'll do it again at the end of the program, but if you could just possibly give us your contact numbers and an email address.
So you can contact me directly at 082 3755 456. It's my personal number, and I will then delegate an individual that can assist you and take care of that for you.
Thank you. Now, Etienne, as far as the fund is concerned, we spoke about the statements,
Yes.
and you said that there's a large statement that you can basically acquire on behalf of a client. That statement, would it basically reflect the individual portfolios that the GEPF has elected for the member? Or
Not that type of detail, more the individual's values. So there's multiple values. There's disability benefits, status benefits, there's death cover, funeral benefits, all of that. But more importantly, it would show the client or the member exactly how much they've accumulated in their pension fund as well. Okay, the magic part of my report as well, it will show you what the required income would be at retirement, and it would then also highlight the deficit, because that's the problem. What you have, you have. What you need, and the difference in between, I think that's the area that you need to focus on.
Now, Etienne, from a financial planning perspective, I mean, obviously you're a financial planner. When looking at a member of GEPF, anyone that's currently contributing to a pension fund or provident fund within the GEPF spectrum, is there any advice you can impart to these members going forward, and what they could do to secure themselves for the future?
The first thing is to plan. You can never plan to fail, but you can fail to plan. So I think what we see is often a sense of unconsciousness. People never consider the fact that, hang on, I need to look at these matters. I need to compare my benefits within my GPF membership to my personal portfolio. One of the biggest concerns is no severe illness benefit in GPF. So if you suffered a stroke or heart attack or are diagnosed with cancer, there's no real benefit that directly links to those conditions. There's death benefit and there's disability income. And the income on disability and death, it's really only effective after 10 years of service. So if you've got less than 10 years of service, it's critical for you to not depend on that, because it's not going to provide sufficient income for your kids. So you need to compare your benefit statement to your personal portfolio and look at what your needs are as an individual, to be sure. But the most important thing you need to consider is my retirement. I'm 42, I'm 52, I have X amount of years left until my contract expires. Did I make provision for my retirement, or is my pension years going to, what we call the golden years, not going to be that golden? Is the biggest concern, and people never consider this, is if I'm earning 20,000 Rand a month and I get to retirement and my income drops to 10, what is going to be the impact on my life based on my life stage? Do I still have kids at school? What is the size of my bond in relation to my income need? And if my life stage is complicated, I need to make provision for that. And often people just don't.
Now Etienne, that brings me to my next question, and probably a concern as an individual looking at saving for retirement. A member of the GEPF, or the Government Employees Pension Fund, if I started out working for the government at age 25 and my retirement age is 60, and I worked for that entire period up to the age of 60, and I've contributed to this fund, at retirement, am I really secure enough to retire with the funding that I've saved in this specific fund? Or are there additions that I should be looking at during my life in order to secure that retirement date?
It's a very broad question. The truth of it is, it's probably something you need to assess ongoing. You could find the individual at some point was at a lower level in terms of the income brackets. He might have acquired a degree and jumped, and it might be sufficient. His personal life stage could also determine the income need at retirement. The only answer really is to consistently assess where you are in relation to where you want to be. There's no single answer for that. So you could have a member that has kids at a later stage, or he's acquired a property much later in his life. You get somebody that could have been more consistent. So there's that magical number of 40 years. So if you've contributed to the same fund for 40 years, you're probably going to have the same income in your retirement that you would have had at retirement. How many people actually get to 40 years of service?
Yeah.
So the only answer is to actually assess it at least once a year.
So coming back to that, Etienne, I mean, if we look at it, at retirement, you mentioned earlier that 1/3 of your pension would be available to you, accessible to you, and the government gives you that as a gift as well, where they basically give you the staggered tax breaks on,
Yes.
on whatever you receive. With that 1/3 portion, what should we be doing with that? Or should we be planning that expensive holiday that we didn't have through our lives? What should we be doing with that?
So that should be careful planning. I think in theory, the ideal would be to eliminate debt.
Okay.
So to say, I'm in an ideal world, yes, I'd like the overseas holiday and the cruise with mommy, and I'd like to buy the new Toyota that's going to take me into my latter years. But first priority would be to eliminate all debt. So if there's a balance on the bond, if there's a few credit cards outstanding, yes, ideally you want to go into your retirement, the income that you're requiring or the annuity income from your 2/3, there shouldn't be any pressure on that to still service legacy debt. So I think in a textbook world, get rid of your debt. Take the 1/3 and eliminate all debt. So your income from the 2/3 is never going to be equal to that of what you had just earned. You must make peace with that unless you've really provided in other ways through retirement annuities or additional funding. But if it's only your retirement, your pension fund, get rid of your debt.
Now, Etienne, briefly, just to conclude, we spoke last week and we touched on it this week as well, is pension fund and retirement reform. There's going to be changes going forward to the Pension Funds Act.
Yes.
And the way retirement is going to be handled from a government perspective and a tax perspective.
Okay.
In a nutshell, and just quite briefly, could you give us just a sneak peek as to what we can expect going forward as far as retirement and pension funds are concerned?
So a lot of the concepts that were introduced in 2014, 2015 have been implemented. The theory, though, is that we are better off. So all the negative rumors were actually just that, rumors. We are actually better off post the reform. The only detailed aspect that's not been finalized has been that around the payout of Provident Fund. Now, we need to be clear that has nothing to do with GPF members. Okay, the laws are very clear. You get Provident Fund and you get a pension fund. The Pension Fund Act talks to the pension funds like GPF only, and there are no real changes in the future. So don't worry about it. Okay, I think on the Provident Fund there's a battle. It's a mind shift that people need to be cognizant of. The reality is, though, that is very opinion based, and when it comes to money and opinion, it's going to take a while. We are specifically talking GPF members now, doesn't affect them. So for now there's no real reform that's going to impact GPF members.
Etienne, I want to say thank you to you for your presence over this last two programs. I think the information that you imparted to all GEPF members and all pension fund members is of the utmost value. From your side, in conclusion, is there any advice in a one-liner that you can give to our members as far as belonging to this specific fund?
It's not even a one-liner, it's just save more. We are not saying, as South Africans, no, we can save for our kids' education. We're specifically talking about retirement. Just separate some of your money every month and provide for your retirement. We are not saving enough money. There's too many retailers that's competing with you. MTNs, your cell phone providers and your DSTV providers are competing for purse. I'm saying, in all of that, find a little bit of money and keep some for yourself. Pay yourself first.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, from the specialist on retirement funding, Mr. Etienne Wilsnach from Alchemy Financial Services. If you are a member of any of these funds, not only Government Employees Pension Fund, we urge you from the Finance Forum, stay a member, and in the event of resignation, please don't squander your money. The future is long. Now's the time to start saving for that future. From me, Abdu-Raof Hanslo, You've been watching the Finance Forum. Until next time, stay focused to your finances.